It is the 2017 Bonitas Comrades Marathon Online Training Seminar. It is awesome to have you with us, and a huge thank you to one of the official sponsors of the Comrades Marathon, Bonitas, for helping us out and making this webinar possible tonight. So a huge welcome. Who are we? Well, my name is Brad Brown. If this is the first webinar that you've joined us on, and with us we've got the official Comrades Marathon coach, Lindsay Parry, and I'll unmute him quick. Lindsay, are you with us? How's it?
I am. I'm with you indeed, and I'm very excited because Wednesday is the 1st of March, and that is what I classify as the opening of Comrades season.
Yep, March and April, obviously the big months. We'll chat more about that tonight. But yeah, Lindsay, you had a good weekend as well. I believe you were at the Deloitte Marathon in Pretoria.
Yeah, strangely, it's the first time I've run it. Very nice marathon. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Very well organized. Lack of finish venue. Yeah, and really the perfect Comrades training run. Bloody tough marathon, but when you're running it easy, it's enjoyable. I wouldn't like to race it.
I can't believe you've never run that thing, considering you live fairly close, and they run through your old school grounds, which is crazy.
Yeah, it is crazy, considering that I matriculated in 1995, and running through the grounds for Deloitte was only the third time I've been through the gates since 1995.
And you probably only went 6 times while you were there anyway, so that's a whole other story. But as always, questions and comments, just to get some housekeeping out the way. Questions and comments, you can pop them in that question bar, and we'll be stopping throughout the presentation. Our goal is obviously to try and make this as interactive as possible and help you as much as we can. Just to run through what you're going to learn this evening, we're going to chat about what you should be and where you should be right now in your training, what you need to focus on for the next 4 weeks, and also why it's important to separate your marathons and ultras by 3 weeks. So we'll get into that in more details in a mo. And we'll also share some of the best Comrades Marathon resources with you as well a little bit later on. So make sure you stick around right till the end of this evening's webinar. Before we start, I just wanted to just touch on something quickly. As you may or may not be aware of, there's a few official charities that are affiliated with the Comrades Marathon, and one of them is the Wildlands Conservation Trust, and part of their fundraising efforts, they put on some incredible events, and one of them just took place this weekend, and I was lucky enough I got invited to go and run, so I just wanted to tell you and just share with you, if this is not on your bucket list, it should be. So they put on the series of events called the Wild Series, and there's a few of them. There's the Montesources Challenge, there's the Golden Gate Challenge. But this past weekend, one was called the Three Cranes Challenge, and it takes place, funnily enough, just north of Pietermaritzburg, just outside a little town called Howick in the Kaapkloof. And that is sort of just some of the images that were taken by the official photographer this weekend, M. Gatlin. She is a phenomenal photographer, and it is just such an incredible run. So as I said, if this isn't on your bucket list, it should be, because it's tough as nails as well, good training over 3 days, lots of climbing, and yeah, I wrote my wife in, and that was her after day 2, a very emotional day 2 it was. 11 hours out on the trails for us. We did 8 hours the day before, so yeah, it was hard work, I can tell you that much. So go check it out. Lindsay, let's talk about Comrades, because that's why we're here. Where should people be right now?
Well, you should be in one of 2 groups, I suppose. Ideally, you want to be qualified and had a really nice build-up, laid your foundation. Remember, January and February were the foundation months, and now you are ready to tackle the main training of March and April. So, look, if you've just qualified, as in this past weekend, then I do suggest and recommend that there's a short recovery period before you hit March and April flat out, because your body does need to recover from a hard marathon. And then there will be people, particularly those that want to run 2 oceans, that, as I said, qualified this weekend or will be qualifying this coming weekend, because that'll be the last opportunity. The only advice that I've got there really is that you must qualify when you're ready. So although I've talked on about it try and qualify last year, if at all possible, qualify in February. The truth of the matter is you shouldn't qualify before you're ready to qualify. It does mean that the later you qualify, the more likely you are to settle for whatever seeding, and you try and run that marathon as easy as you can and still reaching the qualifying standard, because then you'll make it more as part of the training process. But it's important that you are ready for that marathon, because if you try and qualify this weekend for the sake of it, because Lindsay Parry's been telling you to qualify at the latest in February, you go out there this weekend or next weekend and you come unstuck, then you've taken a huge hit, you need to recover from it, and you still haven't qualified. So rather build up a little bit more, make sure that you're ready. And I can't stress this point enough. In terms of Comrade success, March and April are your crunch months. If you train well in March and April, you've got a really excellent chance of finishing the race and getting your goal time. If you're struggling with injury and illness and hacking through March and April, it doesn't mean you're not going to finish the race, but it certainly does mean that your chances are getting slimmer. So we are there, we are at the door, and it's time to do the work.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's talk about that work. Lindsay, Mo will do that, but just a huge thanks once again to Bonitas for making this possible. And just so you know, Bonitas are going to be with you pretty much your entire journey to Comrades and beyond in 2017. They're pretty much part of the road shows that Lindsay is smack bang in the middle of as well. There's the ladies' seminars that have been taking place, and coming up the Bonitas Novice Project as well. They're obviously helping us out with online webinars too. And they're also going to be with you at the expo in your goodie bag, some cool things in there. And then on race day, all the sort of kilometer boards as well. So, yeah, massive thank you to Bonitas. As always, the questions, we've got a couple coming in already. Lindsay, we get asked it all the time, and I think let's get it out of the way straight up. Because Marius asked for it, and then I also got the question on email, and I will get that email so we know exactly who it was from. It was from Zama Ngobo. So Marius is asking it, Zama's asking it as well. Marius saying, during yesterday's Deloitte's marathon, I realized I need more calf strength training. What are the stable exercises I should incorporate? And Zama saying, what's the importance of strength and what can they do? So very similar question, strength training for the uprun. We're going to get asked it again later on, but let's get it out of the way.
Yeah, so look, I wouldn't get too focused in on calf strength training, because in most of the exercises that you do when you're doing strength training, from leg press to single leg squats, step ups onto a bench, lunges, they all do work your calves. They target other areas perhaps. Your lunges and your step ups are more focused on glutes and quads, but there is definitely some calf work. But I would encourage strength training, and I in particular encourage strength training for people who started running to do Comrades, which is an enormous group. And there's 30% of the field this year are going to be novices, and I'd hazard a guess that a minimum of half of those are people that took up running just to do Comrades. So for me, that means doing single leg squats, single leg presses, and step ups. Step ups first onto a low bench and then up onto a high bench. And the squats, the single leg squats and the single leg press will pretty much take care of all the running muscle strength that you need. The step ups will then make you nice and strong for the climbing. And then I would add in some lower abdominal and lower back exercises to make sure that you've got a really nice stable pelvis and nice strong glutes, so that also just minimizes the movement, lateral movement in your hips and in your knees, which will prevent injury. And then, obviously if you still feel, I think it was Morris's question, that you still really need that very specific calf strengthening exercises, then probably the best of those is to stand on a step holding a weight in one hand or having a barbell over the shoulders, and then you literally lower your heel to just below horizontal. You don't want to go too far past horizontal, particularly when you're starting out with calf strengthening exercises. Later on, you could perhaps go down lower, and then you push yourself right up onto your toes. And I would do that exercise with the straight knee so that it targets your gastrocs, and then I would also repeat the exercise with a bent knee so that it targets your soleus, and those are the two muscles that then compromise your calf. But because your calf literally works in so many other movements, I probably wouldn't do the specific calf exercises. I would let the rest of the strength exercises take care of that little bit of strengthening of the calves.
Cool. Lindsay, just following on from that, people asking sort of how many sessions a week should they be doing from a strength training perspective, and is Pilates good for strength training?
So look, if I would prefer that people had started strength training in January, move through February, and then depending on your time that you have available, you would do 2 to 3 sessions in January and February. Moving into March, I would cut those back to 2. In April, you have to feel out a little bit how the training is going, and if you are finding yourself really tired, I would cut back to 1. But if you can manage 2, that's great. And then in May, I would cut back to once a week, and probably 10 days before race day would be my last strength training session. Was there a second part to that question?
Pilates. Is Pilates good for strength training?
Pilates is brilliant. I mean, it's a different type of strengthening, of course, but there's a very good focus on those lower abdominals, glutes, lower back, that really just give you a nice stable core. And if you're in a proper Pilates studio as opposed to a general gym, and you're actually working on some of those Pilates resistance machines, well, then it's excellent because you're getting the best of both worlds. You're getting good strength training, plus you're getting really good, high quality stabilizing of that pelvic region.
All right, a couple of cool questions coming through with regards to how many marathons and how many ultras. Stick around. We're going to cover that and the sort of distance between people asking can they run on consecutive weekends, can they run marathons and that sort of thing. We're going to cover that in a lot more detail in a moment. Lindsay, we get asked this question often as well, and Nicole, who's on the webinar with us tonight, she's asking, can you advise on the mileage to be done for the different medals? Is it possible? Is it a case of how long is a piece of string, or is there a rough sort of guide on, if depending on what medal you're chasing, the sort of ballpark figure you should be doing mileage-wise?
Yeah, so I do. I have got a rough sort of formula that I use, and so for the finishers programs, they range from about 750 to just short of 1,000 kilometers. 750 probably been a bit light, so I would aim for between 850 and 950. Around there is the mileage. And by the way, these are 1 January to race day that I'm giving these numbers. Then for the bronze, about 950 to 1,100 is your range. Bill Rowan, about 1,200 to 1,800, but that's a bit of a push. I think about 1.6-ish is good for Bill Rowan. And then your silver medalists, you're looking at between 1,800 and 2,300, with 1,800 being quite light. You'd have to be a pretty talented runner, I think, to get silver on 1,800, but the general accepted rule of thumb is 2,000. So somewhere in that range, you should be fairly safe.
Cool. And then last question for this round before we get into the what you should focus on in the next 4 weeks, and I think it's a great question. It's from Tunzi. And Tunzi saying, should you train consistently high mileage all the way through March, April, and May, or should you schedule a recovery week sometime in there?
You must schedule recovery weeks in there. It's very difficult, especially for non-elites. Look, elite athletes also schedule in recovery. So, but for people who work full-time jobs, it's compulsory. You won't get through, or if you do get through 8 to 10 weeks without a recovery week, you are unlikely to arrive fresh on race day. You're unlikely to arrive uninjured. You're unlikely to arrive healthy. So typically, that formula is to load for 3 weeks, recover for 1. But I do find that people with really stressful jobs, and in particular people who really can't get enough sleep because of work or whatever other commitments, that a 2-week loading and 1-week recovery also works quite well. So you need to just check out where you fall on that spectrum. And as I said, generally accepted 3 weeks on, 1 week with recovery. And your recovery needs to be less than 80% of your 3 weeks loading. So anywhere between 60 and 80%. And you can gauge that on just how tired you are at the end of the 3-week block.
Cool. Lindsay, just one quick question. Let me get this in because it's one that we get asked all the time as well. I think every webinar we do, we get asked, and we have to cover it because I think it's important. And it's from Awonke. Awonke saying, I've been training for a silver using the silver medal program. Did my second marathon ever this Sunday, moved from a C to a B seeding. Is it a good idea to try and chase an A seeding on the next marathon, which is happening on the 9th of April?
No. So that's a absolute no. Look, there are 1 or 2 races around that, based on you wanting to get a silver, you could get a silver seeding with a firm training run, so not racing, but a sub-3 in a marathon, that's pushing. And if you do that in April, that means that you're going to have to take a week off to recover, and then probably another week of building up, so you're missing 2 weeks of important training time. But if there's a 48 or a 54 kilometer race anywhere near you, then those 2 races have got the, in inverted commas, softest A seeding, because the 48K has the same qualifying time as the 50K, so 48 or 50K, so you basically get given 2 kilometers. But in reality, you don't need that A seeding. You need to be in the right shape to get a sub-3. So if you can run an 85-minute 21, that'll tell you what all the speed you need for a silver, all the speed you need for a sub-3, and then you're better off spending March and April training and not worrying about a huge effort to qualify, because on race day, the difference between B and A seed when you cross the start line is 11 seconds. So you do not need to get the A seeding because you're going to lose any time at the start. And in fact, you're more inclined to run more conservatively running with the B seeded guys than you are with the A seeded guys, where it will be much easier to get sucked into running too fast.
Yeah, Lindsay, and if I can just add my 2 cents worth as well, I was chatting to a lot of guys this weekend, and the guys are talking about going and chasing seedings to get one group up, and the up run coming out of Durban, the seeding in Maritzburg, and obviously the roads are narrow, but those seedings really don't make that much of a difference in the greater scheme of things. And like you said, I mean, the residual value that's in your legs by chasing that seeding that affects your training after that marathon is just not worth it. So that's my 2 cents worth. Let's talk about the next 4 weeks. Lindsay, if someone's on the Vic Clapham program, what should they be focusing on right now?
Yeah, so it's there. You can read it. Consistency is everything for a finisher's medal. The most important thing for the finishers is that they put together week after week after week after week all the way up to Comrades, because if you can train week in, week out, even if it's 40 Ks a week, if you train week in, week out, you literally just get your body into the groove, get that training going, you are going to have an excellent chance of finishing the race. Make sure that you work so hard at recovery. So rest when you need to rest. Focus for the next 10 weeks on really eating well. Get as much sleep as your life will allow you, but very importantly, get good quality sleep. So half an hour before bedtime, no screen time. That means laptops, cell phones, iPads, TV. Read a book or talk to your husband or wife. I know that's a novelty these days, but let's get back to relationships, because that will make a huge difference to the amount of recovery that you get. And then finally, if you have an injury, if there is pain, treat it. Treat it immediately. Don't wait. Don't let injuries turn into big problems and then have you sitting out weeks of training. If something's sore, treat it straight away. Ice treatment immediately. Try and get to a physio as quickly as possible, because if we can keep you consistent and keep you on the road, you're going to go and get your finisher's medal. And that's, yeah, I'll finish it off where the slide actually starts. Consistency, consistency, consistency.
Absolutely. Could not agree more, Lindsay. The bronze medal, 9 to 11 hours. What's the story there for the next 4 weeks?
So we're moving into peak mileage now. Yeah, I mean, I'll emphasize that across all the medals. You want to manage your long run. So I am going to talk about that in more general terms across all the medals, but you don't want to be plowing into too many ultras and marathons. You do want to be hitting the 30K to 35K range runs pretty often, more or less every weekend except your recovery weeks. But the marathons and the ultras, you want to, a good rule of thumb is one a month, either a marathon or an ultra. But you just don't want to be doing that every single weekend. And then, very important, so many people that are in this sort of area are desperate to get up one more seating pin. Now, we've answered that question. There is no need to chase seating, because all that seating does is it actually costs you training time. And when you're falling into the 9 to 11 hour category, all that moving up a seating pen can do is save you about a minute to 2 minutes at most on race day. But the 2 weeks of missed training is going to cost you a lot more than 2 minutes on race day. So from here on in, we don't race anymore. If you want to test your fitness, do it on a time trial or a 10, perhaps a half marathon, but you certainly don't want to be doing that every month. You just possibly one half marathon somewhere along the line that you'll run hard just to give yourself that pat on the back and confidence that training is going well.
Yeah, Lindsay, and you talk about the no more racing. I know the guys, particularly up in Gauteng, Pretoria, Johannesburg, there's literally races every Saturday and Sunday. And I know you've said it often too, that if you can't go to a race and just use it as a slow training run, if you have to go and as hard as you can, don't go and race. Rather do those runs on your own.
Absolutely. Look, doing a race as training is such an awesome way of having a training run, because then you don't have to stop at petrol stations or at shopping centers to buy yourself drinks, whatever. You've got it all there. Every water point's got everything that you need, but you have to quell that competitive edge. Otherwise, you just break your body down further and further until you line up tight on race day. When it really matters, you can't deliver.
Yep, absolutely. All right, let's talk about the Bull Rowans.
Hill work. So the Bull Rowans are starting to get into the part of the field where you've actually got to be a pretty good runner. Only 25% of the field will get a Bull Rowan medal. And it's, often people will say, yeah, but it's not necessarily the effort that differs between a 12-hour and a Bull Rowan or silver. And I do agree that a lot of it isn't always a difference in effort, and it often is to do with a difference in ability. But the one thing that with the Bull Rowan, and we'll see it now on the next slide with the silvers, is your walking time does need to be reduced. And so the only way that you can really get strong enough to not walk too much of the hills, and you will still do some walking on the Bull Rowan, so it's not like you're going to run the whole way, but is by doing hill work and getting nice and strong on hills and making those hills in Durban feel just that little bit flatter. So you're going to get started on the hills probably from next week, and work really hard on that through to race day. Again, you just like all the other medals, you're going to be hitting your peak mileage. So what does peak mileage look like and mean for the Bull Rowan? It's probably in the region of 100 k's a week at its peak. So moving into March now, you're probably sitting at between 70 and 80 Ks a week, and over the next 8 weeks going to move that up to about 100 Ks a week. So it's quite a lot of running, and again that means let's focus on that recovery. Let's make sure that you get in some good quality recovery drinks after your, in particular, hill sessions or your really long training runs. And then also the sleep and the general nutrition become really, really important.
Cool. Let's talk about the racing snakes.
So silver, big commitment. As I said earlier, you're looking at around about 2,000, probably close to 2,200 Ks between the 1st of January and race day. And the bulk of those 2,000 Ks are going to happen in the next 2 months. So you probably hitting somewhere between 100 and 120 Ks a week now. And that's going to move right up to in the region of 130 to 160 Ks a week, depending on how silver you are going and how borderline you are, I guess. But really what that boils down to is a lot of running. If I just work it out in a super simple equation quickly, no, that's not right. 132 hours, that would not be right. Then no one would be getting silver if it took that much running. But yeah, it's a good couple of hours of running that you are required to do. So I just want to get this calculation right. I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong exactly, but anyway, I'll worry about it when I can think about it. But you're spending a heap of time running, so it takes a huge commitment, and I can only emphasize some more how much stricter you now have to get about your recovery, because there's not a lot of time between sessions. There are going to be days where you're probably doing double sessions. So if you don't get in your recovery and nutrition in the morning, you're not eating healthy during the day, then you're going to arrive at your second session smashed. And if you run your second session smashed, that's going to compromise your training the next day. So you really have to go all out with recovery. I'd probably, for the silver oaks in particular, look at adding something like massage every 2 to 3 weeks, compression tights, and sleep and nutrition always go without saying. And then there I've got it, hills, because you'll probably walk somewhere in the region of 1 minute every 10 Ks, and preferably those minutes will coincide with the hill so that you don't have to do too much extra walking on the hills. And you're looking at running 5 minutes a K all the way from Durban into Pietermaritzburg over some serious hills. So the hill work on the silver program is quite brutal. You download it from the website. One thing I can assure you is that after the last hill session, you will celebrate. It'll be a good feeling when you know that's behind you, but it'll make you really strong. And then finally, you've got to listen to your body. So, I mean, I've been hopping on about how much you've got to do, but if you're not recovering properly, if you're not handling that training load, if you don't listen to your body and you break down with injury, then you've got very little chance of getting a silver medal. So listen to your body on the days that you really, really feel exhausted. If there's a high intensity session scheduled, turn it into an easy session. If it's a long run scheduled, turn it into a shorter and an easier run. If you miss a session here or there, and that looks after your total integrity, that's great. If you force those sessions even when you're absolutely dog-tired and you get sick or you get injured, you start to compromise your silver medal.
Yeah, Lindsay, you talk about those hills. I actually didn't mention it, but on the way back from the Karkloof yesterday, I drove the Comrades route. I posted a photo of the sign at the top of Polly Shorts in the Coach Parry Facebook group yesterday as well. And yeah, if anybody is under illusions that hill training doesn't help you for Comrades, there's some crazy hills. I've forgotten how mad that route is. Let's take a look at some of the questions and a couple of the things that you've touched on. Danny is saying, I'd like to know, and I don't know if it is possible to do this, I'd like to know what percentage of race time during Comrades should ideally be spent walking My current pacing strategy plan is based around 20 to 25% of race time walking and 75 to 80% running. Is this realistic or too much walking? Also, should a run walk strategy be primarily scheduled? So either like a 30-minute run, 2-minute walk, or should it be reactive? You only walk when the terrain gets harder, or should it be a mix of both? I think it's a great question with regards to the run walk strategy. Lindsay, is it possible to say in percentage terms what you should be doing? I guess it'll differ from medal to medal.
Yeah, so it will differ from medal to medal. So that was going to be my only question: is where in the field is Danny aiming to finish? But look, 20 odd percent walking for me, that covers quite a broad range, probably right from 9.5 to 10 hours, roughly, maybe close to 10 hours, all the way through to the finisher's medal. So that doesn't sound like an unreasonable run-walk strategy. And then the answer to part two is, should it be structured or reactive? Well, it needs to have a degree of both. So the reason why I like the structured is because the deeper you get into the race, the more reliant you become on rhythm and not having to think too much. So if you know that you are going to run for 30 minutes or 15 minutes or whatever that structure is that you've practiced in training, and then you're going to get a 2-minute walk, and once that 2-minute ends, you're going to start running, then you literally go into a bit of autopilot and you do what you need to do. If it's completely unstructured and you're just going to walk when you feel like walking and run as much as you can run, early on you will tend not to walk enough, because you'll be like, oh, I feel good and I should run a little bit further. And later on you're going to walk too much, because when you are tired and you start walking, you're going to make little deals with yourself. Okay, well, I'll walk to that pot plant, and then you'll get there and you'll go, oh no, I'm going to walk to that pole. And when you get there, okay, I'm going to walk to that water point. But it does need to have some flexibility in it, particularly around the hills, so that when you do get onto the hills, and just because you've now in a half an hour running stretch, you don't have to run for half an hour. You can feel out that hill a little bit, because some hills will need a little bit more walking than other hills. So I would just go there with a plan and stick to it mostly, but a little bit flexible around the climbs.
Lindsay, another great question as well, and I don't think we've had this one before, but it happens all the time, so I think it's important that we cover it. It's from Doe. Principally, Doe is saying, what's the best advice that you can give to runners who are still trying to qualify, and they get sort of sucked into doing more and more races and just can't get that qualifying done? I mean, it happens so often. You saw guys who ran in Cape Town, as an example, ran the Peninsula Marathon last weekend, and the conditions were horrific with that southeaster. Maybe missed a cutoff, so they decide they're going to go and run Kango Marathon a week later. Should they not try and get on track again, training-wise, and then focus on just one event to get it done? He's saying he's qualified, but he's got a few friends who are sitting in this position, and he's finding that they're just doing too many long ones and losing out on proper recovery and effective training time. What's the deal there? What should they do?
Donna, I think Doe should come and sit here, and he can do a webinar. He's absolutely spot on. I had that question while I was on the road yesterday, running with one of the ladies in the race, and she said, look, she's got a friend who literally just keeps missing qualifying, and she tried it, and she's basically tried to qualify 3 or 4 times in a 6-week period. And I was like, look, what she needs to do is let her body recover, because she's hammering it with one hard hit after one hard hit. So psychologically, it's not helping her anyway, because she keeps missing it. But she actually just needs to let her body recover a little bit, put in a nice bit of training, and then give it another go. And if she does that, if she's this close to qualifying, she just gives her body a little bit of a break, then she will qualify. And the Peninsula Kango Caves is like such a classic example. You know, people who got through what was a very tough day at Peninsula, if they just let their bodies recover and then put in a good 3 or 4 week block of training, they would qualify at their next marathon. I understand that a lot of people are under pressure because they will really want to qualify so they can also do 2 oceans. But sometimes you've got to accept that you have to let go of a little bit of short-term goal so that you can achieve the long-term goal. But having said that, even if they had skipped Kango and given themselves just enough time to recover from the marathon, even if they'd given themselves 2 weeks, which is not ideal, but it's better, they would have had a better chance then of going one step better than Peninsula. But Kango being so close to where you've literally hammered your body, yeah, it's unlikely that people are going to be successful. Those that are, well done, but they've then really damaged their bodies and have to recover. So, Doe, you tell your mates they need to give themselves a couple of days of slack, recover, and then they probably need to look at between 3 and preferably 4 weeks' time before they try and qualify again.
Yeah, Lindsay, and I know Doe's up north in Gauteng. There's so many opportunities between now and the cutoff date for Comrades. I mean, there's still a long way to go to get that qualifier in. So, and it's exactly what you're saying. It's obviously people trying to run OMTOM and Comrades in the same year as well. We obviously talking a lot about recovery, and I love this question. I think it's Harish. I hope I pronounced it right. Harish is saying, is afternoon naps beneficial when it comes to recovery? Harish, afternoon naps are just beneficial generally. I love them. But Lindsay, your take on afternoon naps, do they help you recover better?
Look, you only have to look at what a wonderful effect an afternoon nap has on your kid's disposition by the time 5 p.m. arrives to know that afternoon naps are very good for you. So, yes, no, absolutely. And in particular, if you are struggling for sleep at night, even a 20-minute nap can have a really positive effect on recovery. Obviously, if you can afford a bit longer, that's great. What you do have to watch out for, though, is a 2-3 hour afternoon nap can then compromise your ability to sleep at night. And the night sleep is much more important for recovery because that's when we get our testosterone and growth hormone release. So afternoon naps absolutely work. Just be careful of how long they are so that they don't compromise evening sleep.
All right. Let me have a look here. This question's from Carl. How do we manage recovery, drinking, etc., if it's too costly to do, as most usually need to do it? I'm not quite sure. Yeah, from a cost perspective, I'm guessing recovery drinks is what Carl's asking. It can become quite expensive if you sort of needing to take all the nutrition and supplements and that sort of thing. Lindsay, your advice there?
Yeah, so I'll then use the Kenyans as an example. They basically live on very sweet, milky chai tea. So what is it in the recovery drink that's truly good for you or for your recovery? It's the sugar, and then in some of the other recovery drinks, obviously you also get some good quality proteins. So what is that? How do you use that advice practically? Well, things like chocolate milk, or tea, as I said, very milky tea, become really good recovery drinks afterwards at a fraction of the cost of what you're paying for other recovery drinks.
Sorry, I'm trying not to laugh here, Lindsay. We for those of you who have been on these webinars for a few years, we've been doing them. We obviously have people from all around the world on these, and there's South Africanisms, and we say things that are normal to us, but obviously our international listeners might hear something totally different. So, Lindsay, you're going to enjoy this one. Danny Suskin was saying, just for our viewers from the USA, a pot plant in South Africa is not marijuana. It's called a potted plant. It's called a potted plant in the USA. So, Danny, thanks for that. Much appreciated. We're gonna employ you as our translator.
That's brilliant.
I love it. Absolutely love it. All right. Let's see a couple other questions before we get into the importance of 3 weeks between. All right, this is a good one. What's the longest run you should do before race day and tapering? It's also a question we get very often. I know I saw something online earlier today that the Cosmos 3-in-1's coming up as well, and people are getting all excited about that. Lindsay, your take on the long run?
So, look, my personal feeling on the long run has always been that it's too long for the average person. So, your silver medalists, and in particular your sub 7 hour silver medalists, and obviously faster than that, and the guys going for gold medals, they will probably do between 60 and 70 Ks, depending on who you're working with. My personal feeling is closer to 60, 64 Ks at most. And for your silver to elite runners, that's going to be done about 4 weeks before race day. But for the rest of the field, Oceans is about as far as it should be. So 50 to 55 Ks is, in my book, plenty long enough. And for your anyone slower than silver, that should be done 5 weeks before. Now that does, with two Oceans being 7 weeks away this year, that does create a little bit of a complication, because I wouldn't run 56 Ks 7 weeks before and then 5 weeks before run 50K. So this year, my advice to people in the way that I'm planning my athletes' programs that are slower than silver is that they'll do Oceans if that's a race they want to do, and then 3 weeks later they'll do a marathon. So the last long run will be a marathon, and that'll be 4 weeks out.
All right. Just also, we're getting lots of questions in with regards to specifics about should I run this race instead of that race. Obviously, on a platform like this, it's very difficult to give individual advice. Stick around, because I'm going to give you some options afterwards. We're going to be doing some more stuff online where you can then get more sort of one-on-one time and get those sort of questions answered. But we're trying to keep it as general and generic as possible, and sort of cover as broad as we can. Great question here from Graham Lindsay. And again, it's also one of those things we get asked a lot, and it's got to do with cramps. What do you advise someone does who's susceptible to cramping?
My favorite question for 2017, and officially my worst question for all other 10 years as official Comrades coach. But in 2016, there was a great product that was developed by a South African company. It's called Cramp Not. I know the cramp industry is filled with very original names: Cramp Stop, Cramp Ease, Cramp Block. But this one is Cramp Not. It's a gel. And the research that they've done has shown unbelievable results. And everybody that I have who's told me that they cramp and that I've recommended they try this product has emailed me or messaged me and told me how stoked they are that they found a product that works. So Cramp Not, you get it at discount pharmacies. I promise I'm not getting any kickbacks for it. It's good stuff and it works. So if you cramp, go and get Cramp Not. It'll change your life.
In saying that, though, Lindsay, don't get just for Comrades race day. Try it out in other races before Comrades, so that you can check if it does work for you, if it agrees with you. If not, you can chat to Lindsay. We'll do it there. All right. Okay, the hill trainings. Who is it that's asking this? Another great question. Diddy Ward saying, can you give us some more info on the hill training? For example, 5 times 2 minute. How do you do it? Do you sprint it? Just talk us through actual hill repeats and how we should be doing it.
So I'm going to tell you to go and download either the bronze or the silver program from the Comrades website, depending on which medal it is that you're training for. Because then that'll give you a nice systematic build-up over the next 8 weeks. But you will start off with 3 to 4 repetitions of between 2 and 3 minutes. You're looking for a hill that's between 3 and 5% in gradient, or if you can do it on a treadmill, you can set that gradient to 4 or 5%, and then you will jog back down for recovery. For Bill Rowan's, you will build that up to around 8 repeats of 2 to 3 minutes. And for silver program, you would build up, if you're doing 2 minute repeats, you'd build up to 10 to 12. And if you're doing 3 minutes, you'd build up to 8 repeats of 3 minutes of hard running.
Cool. Lindsay, just some clarity. Amanda's asking, and I think it's out of disbelief. We were talking about the mileage for the different medals earlier on. And Amanda's saying, just want to confirm that you said for a finisher you need to do about 40 kilometers a week. So I mean, I can't, for the life of me, I've got a mind like a goldfish. What was the finisher medal mileage from the 1st of January to
No,
Comrades?
so let me clarify that. What I said was that the consistency is the most important thing. So if you would be better off running 40 Ks a week from now until Comrades and doing that consistently and remaining injury free and healthy, you would have a better chance of finishing than pushing high mileage and breaking down with injury and missing weeks of training. But what you're aiming for is close to 900 Ks. So I did say that the minimum is 750, and that 750 is probably around 40 Ks a week. But you're aiming for around 900 kilometers over 5 months.
Well, I've just done the maths, Lindsay. Let me jump in here. It's 23 weeks from the 1st of January to Comrades Race Day. 900 Ks is 39.1 Ks a week average. So there it is on the button.
Yeah, but you're going to remember you're going to start quite a bit lower in January and February, and in March and April you're going to peak maybe 55, 60 Ks a week on the finishers program, and then there will be weeks that are spiked by either a Two Oceans, Dam, a marathon. So there will be your average week now in March and April, maybe somewhere between 50 and 60 Ks, with the odd week that will be much higher than that when you've done these big races.
Cool. All right, let's get we'll get to more questions in a moment, but let's talk about planning races. And we said at the start of the webinar you were going to be talking about the length of time between marathons and ultra marathons. Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, so the bulk of the field should be spacing their marathons and ultras, or marathon, ultra marathon, or marathon, ultra, should be spaced by a minimum of 3 weeks. And that is to allow you to actually absorb the damage from that long training run and to actually benefit from it, so your body gets stronger before you go and do the next one, so that you're better prepared when you get to the next one. If you do them too close together, when you get into the next one, you go into it pretty tight, and you end up just really smashing your legs up, and you get into a bit of a downward spiral instead of an upward spiral. In other words, you're under recovering or not recovering enough. So my preferred thing is 4 weeks, and that's to say literally once a month you will do a marathon or an ultra, and so that pretty much means that you will end up doing, for the majority of the field, 2 marathons and an ultra, or 1 marathon and 2 ultras. But that is enough for basically everybody who's slower than 9 hours. If you're going for a bull run, you perhaps get away with adding in 1 more. And then if you are on the silver program, again, it's different, because the silver medalists tend to recover a lot quicker. Their biomechanical stress is a lot lower. And so you probably find that you'll end up doing as a silver medalist, whether you do it in actual races or if you're just doing it as training, probably find that you're doing a 40K run every 2-3 weeks, but I would still space my ultras. In other words, my 45 to 50K efforts, I would still space those around 3 weeks apart. And then what you want to try and do, and it's not always practical, especially for the finishers people, is you want to try and not have one single run that is exceeding 30% of your total volume. That is going to happen occasionally when you do your marathons and your ultras, but again, that's why I like that to be spaced 3 or 4 weeks apart, because that's always going to be more than 30%. So in other words, to do a marathon, if you want to do a marathon regularly, what that's saying to you is that your weekly mileage should be 120 Ks. And there's very few people that are there. So that means that every time you do that 40K, it's well outside the 30% rule, and therefore you need to give yourself some time to recover before you do it again.
Cool, absolutely. All right, let's touch on a few more questions. Keep them coming. I know we are running out of time, but we've had a few questions with regards to sort of upset tummies on runs, Lindsay, and a couple of people saying they're really struggling with GI issues and getting that right. What advice can you give to people who are sort of obviously trying to get their race day nutrition practice now, but are really struggling with sort of upset stomachs and that on their longer runs?
Yeah, so look, I have had a few of these recently, and I'm going to just get a little bit distracted here while I look for a conversation that I was having with someone last night about it, because they used a different product which seemed to sort their stuff out. So sorry, I just want to quickly find that. Okay, so look, everybody's going to probably find a slightly different solution to their problem, but typically the people that are getting those gut issues and getting nauseous, a lot of the time it's because most of the means of getting energy in are sweet, high carbohydrate drinks. Okay, so that there are products and gels. There are products in the market which are much slower release in nature, and they are made with more complex carbohydrates. So those are the sort of things that I would try if you are struggling with nausea. I would immediately go for those. They're not as sweet. For example, you get, instead of using gels, which a lot of people don't agree with, you can rather get chewable tablets, or like gum shots, or like little jelly babies, I guess they're called, but they're all made from products that are not quite as sweet as some of the other things. So that's the one avenue that you can try. Then something that I experimented with in 2012 at Comrades, which worked fantastically, and it's actually exactly what worked for this friend of mine that's really been suffering with debilitating nausea from 32 Ks, is to take almost a meal replacement, so a recovery drink. So that's something that's perhaps meant to be used for after exercise, or what I used in 2012 was one of these carbo loading meal replacements. It's a thing that you're typically supposed to use as a powder breakfast, which I didn't use before I exercised. I actually used it in Comrades itself. So it does lead to a little bit of bloating. So when you take it immediately, it maybe doesn't feel that great. But because you need to take much less of it, and you need to take it much less often, it definitely helps with the nausea. So there is loads of time between now and Comrades race day. So there's loads of different products I would try. If you're not coming right with a product to try, then I would experiment with some solid foods like little baby potatoes, bananas, cashew nuts, dates, those sort of things that would provide you with some energy, but are more natural foods that you perhaps are used to eating. And of course, I am spending a bit of time with dietitian on the road, so I've literally been asked this question now 6 or 7 times in the last 10 days. So I am trying to gather as much information, and hopefully I'll have a better answer as we move closer to Comrades.
Cool stuff. Lindsay, let me find it. Who was it from? There we go. It's from Nick. And if I can just also, before I get you to answer it, because I want to give my 5 cents worth too, if I can. Nick's saying, what's the best advice for novices? So, Nick, we're going to share some resources at the end of this webinar. And I I love driving this fact home because I think it's so important with the day and age that we live in. There's so much information available, and it's easy to sort of pick and choose the advice and the info that you want, and it might not necessarily be the best info for you. So what I would suggest is find one person that you can sort of sell out to. So whether it be Lindsay, who's the official Comrades Marathon coach, or if it's one of the other coaches, there are a few out there, but find one person, stick to their training program, stick to their advice, and just follow their advice. I know there are thousands of people who have run Comrades and reckon they're coaches because they've run Comrades, and they're more than willing to dish out advice. But it is so easy to get overwhelmed and confused by sort of just taking all the advice in and trying to do everything. Seriously, find one person, stick with them. And my advice, obviously, would be Lindsay, but yeah, it's entirely up to you with regards to who you follow. Lindsay, your sort of advice for someone who's a novice, best bit of advice you can give a novice?
Look, it does depend where they come from, because if it's someone international, particularly Northern Hemisphere, where they're going to come and it's going to be really, really hot, I'm going to say you've got to find ways of acclimatizing yourself a little bit to the heat, or finding products that you know will help to keep you cool on race day. And then for everybody else who's a novice to Comrades, my biggest piece of advice is to look after injuries. If you start the race uninjured and healthy, you really do have a good chance of finishing. And if you start the race with an injury, you are going to struggle to finish the race. So that's really my biggest piece of advice. And then my not far behind is to really get a great training, a race plan. Run a conservative plan based on advice from someone that you really trust around the Comrades. The first 36 k's of the up run has to be as conservative as you can actually dare to go, because you have to save some running for the last third of the up run.
Cool. A couple of people just asking about that cramp stuff that you mentioned. It's cramp knot. That's from Tunzi. Cramp knot is the name of it. And I'm trying to think who it was that was asking. It was Lynn saying, do you take it as an ongoing maintenance thing, or is it just during races that you would take it, Lindsay?
No, so I've only used it in races, and the way that it's prescribed in inverted commas is that you would take it as a precautionary just before the event, and then every 2 to 3 hours thereafter. So you would use it as a gel, because it is also an energy gel, but then it's got the active ingredient. Yeah, so I guess in a Comrades, that would mean you're looking at least 3. If you took them every 3 hours, you're looking at least 3 of them, plus whatever other gel you normally use.
Cool. Question in from Rob, who's in Cape Town. He's saying, what's the best pace if you're aiming for a bull row, and in terms of easy runs and LSD, what should heart rate be in terms of percentage of max? Is it what sort of guidelines could you give Rob, Lindsay?
Look, somewhere between 68 and 75%, bearing in mind that you will experience cardiac drift when you do your very long run. So I would establish my pace based on heart rate in the first hour or so of the race, of the training run, and somewhere between 68 and 75, starting to get to the upper end. You probably want to be close to 72, 73. But then after that, I would focus on maintaining that pace and also how I feel, because once you get in particular 2 hours and then 3 hours, you will start to experience cardiac drift, where your heart rate will actually be higher than, it'll be reflected as higher than the actual effort, and so then you'll end up running probably too easy.
Lindsay, funnily enough, now that I mention it, we haven't had this question, and I think it's an important one too. Lynn Linnae wanted to know about running shoes. How fresh or worn in should your running shoes be before Comrades? What's the best strategy to make sure you're in the sort of optimum when it comes to shoes on race day?
So shoes are at their absolute best nowadays, somewhere between 150 and 250, and then they're still in like really good nick up to probably around 400, 450. So the 150, 200 means that they're still practically brand new, but that you've run in the insole enough that your foot's sitting nice and snugly, and there's a little bit of an imprint in there. But right up to 400 Ks, that shoe will still be like really amazing. Up to 600, between 400 and 600 Ks, you'll probably still get a comfortable enough run on race day. And then from 600 onwards, the shoe is fine, and will still stand you in good stead probably in training, but on race day it may just have started to pick up a few little imperfections, maybe a bit of rubbing in a specific spot. The cushioning will just be that little bit harder. So yeah, I probably wouldn't race in a shoe that's got 600 Ks in it.
All right, cool. Another quick question in from Kevin, who's in Mumbai in India. Kevin, thanks for joining us. He's running his first Comrades this year. He's got a pretty decent marathon time, 3:34. He's done lots of ultras, 8 ultras. He's done 200 Ks, 5 12-hour runs, 1 24-hour run. And he's asking about the mental side of things. What's the best way to prepare yourself mentally for Comrades? And I think this applies to everyone because it is a very big mental game. Advice to get your head right?
Yeah, look, I think that the tools will be very similar to the tools he's used for all of these races. So there are probably 2 things that I would focus on. And the one is to go into Comrades knowing that no matter how well prepared you are for the race, you get really tired and quite sore and uncomfortable. More so on the down than the up, but you still get pretty sore and uncomfortable, past 60 Ks, no matter who you are or how well prepared you are. So that is something you must mentally prepare yourself for, because a lot of people train and then they train harder and then they train harder, thinking every year that they're going to get this race where it just is easy all the way to the finish, and that's never going to happen. So mentally be prepared to know that you will be really tired and really uncomfortable after 60 Ks, but that even in that discomfort and tiredness, you can still move along at the speed that you need to move along at. So that's the one aspect. The other aspect is on race day, from a mental point of view, you don't want to think about Comrades as an 86K run, and each marker board that you get to, you tick off 1K, because mentally that's going to be a real drain by the time you get even to halfway. What you want to do is break the race up into little chunks, either 10K chunks or to a specific landmark. In the second half of the race, probably back to that 60K plus, where you're going to be struggling anyway, you may break it down to just getting from one water table to the next. So your race then gets broken down into 2.5, 3K chunks that you just really focus on getting to the end of that chunk before you focus on the next chunk, before you focus on the next chunk, which all of a sudden becomes the finish. And that's the way I deal with it mentally on race day.
Or you could just run to the next pot plant. That's probably the best way to go about it. All right, we are rapidly running out of time. I just wanted to share some resources with you that'll help you on your journey. We've got some exciting news coming up as well. So comrades.com, obviously, there's a ton of resources on there. Lindsay's website, which is coachparry.com. A lot of the questions that we haven't got to tonight. So if you asked a question and we didn't get to it, just go to coachparry.com. There's a search bar there. Just type in your question, if it's about cramps or if it's about hill repeats or whatever it is, and I'm willing to put money on it. There is a podcast that answers that question. So go and check it out. CoachParry.com is the website. Also, the Bonitas Comrades road shows, the Bonitas Novice Project seminars, those are great. They're coming up. You can get the whole schedule on the Comrades website, as well as the Bonitas ladies seminars as well. And then training programs. If you haven't picked up one of the training programs, there's generic programs with regards to the individual medals. So depending on what you're chasing, that's the URL to get to. Okay, comrades.com/marathon center/training. You can get the Vic Clapham bronze, Bill Rowan, and silver training program there. If you're looking for more individualized programs, so if you want to tie in specific races, goal races in the build up to Comrades, you can get specific Coach Parry coaching packages. That's the URL to get to coachparry.com/running-coaching-packages. Go check those out if you do want individualized programs. And then also, if you'd like to connect with Lindsay, and obviously this time of the year is super busy. He's doing lots of traveling around the country doing these various talks, so time is very limited between that and him working with his athletes. So unfortunately we can't answer every single email. It's just it is impossible. So make sure you go check out the private Facebook group, okay? It is coachparry.com/Facebook. Just go there now. It'll redirect you to Facebook, to the group. Just request to join, and we'll get you in there. So it's coachparry.com/Facebook. There's going to be some cool stuff happening between now and Comrades in that Facebook group. Okay, so go and join it right now. 99% of people are on Facebook. Get in there and get interactive and start chatting. We got asked this earlier on in the podcast, in the webinar. I didn't want to answer it then because I knew it was coming later. A couple of people asking about the Ask Coach Parry podcast. The good news is they are returning very soon. They're going to be slightly different to what we've done in the past, but I'm pretty excited about what we're doing. So those are coming pretty soon. If you want to check those out, just go to askcoachparry.com. We'll also have all the details as soon as it'll be within the next week in the coachparry.com Facebook group. So go check that out as well. The next webinar is happening on Monday, the 27th of March, 2017. If you're on this one live, it means you've registered for this one. You will get automatic reminders. You don't need to register again. But if you're watching the replay of this, which is going to be on the Comrades website, it'll also be on coachparry.com and on the Bonitas website as well. If you didn't register for it and you missed the live, make sure you go to coachparry.com/webinar and you can register. It's absolutely free. Once you've registered once, you'll be registered for the entire series as well. So, Lindsay, yeah, we unfortunately are out of time. Those one-on-one sort of questions, please get into that Facebook group. Like I said, it's virtually impossible for us to answer all of those one-on-one, but we're going to try our best in that Facebook group to get to as many as we can between that and the podcast. So get in there, get interactive, and yeah, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Lindsay, parting shot from you. Anything you want to add before we go?
Treat injuries now. That's my, particularly in March, there is still time to Comrades, and the more consistency you can build up, the better. So you are much better off missing 3 or 4 days now and making sure that an injury is 100% gone than trying to drag that through your training. So that's my parting shot for this month, and I really look forward to interacting with you guys on the podcasts again and the next webinar, which will be in a month's time.
Absolutely. So from myself, Brad Brown, and Lindsay Parry, thank you so much for joining us tonight. Go and get some rest. It's important. And we'll see you in that Facebook group, okay? coachparry.com/Facebook. Make sure you join. Until next time, cheerio.